Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode 230 of The Ball is Round. My name is Andy Coronado, and tonight on the show, we react to Canada men's game versus Guatemala in the Gold Cup, CF Montreal's first home win of the season at Saputo, and more. As always, I'm joined tonight by my partner in crime, Elias Grigoriotis. What
Good morning.
is good? Did I even say your name right? Elias, I'm exhausted, man. I want to ask you, how's your weekend? But I'm just gonna start off by saying I've had a hell of a weekend. How's your weekend going?
Emotionally exhausting.
Up and down, baby.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what's up.
Hi to Sports 7765 podcast. I don't know if you're a Montreal fan or a Guatemala fan, so either welcome or stop rubbing it in. But thank you for joining us. And yeah, that's how my weekend's been. Yes, it's been both.
Oh my
So a little
god.
bit of little bit of celebration, a little bit of grieving, whole lot of grieving. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I like
But
you. Yeah.
such is life and such is football. Am I right?
Mm. Like I said, man, it's been a kind of a up and down week. Just you said mentally, emotionally, just tired because you just don't know. You go from 1 minute being super happy to the next being super what the hell did I just see, to the next minute being like, oh, I'm in front of a camera and I have to say stuff and sound like I'm actually
Damn
like
straight.
like I have to put my thoughts and reactions into words, and it's just getting it's not that easy, especially when again there's a lot of emotions involved, right? It's fresh. It just happened. What we're talking about less than 30 minutes ago. um
Okay.
let's get right into it, right? Canada men's national team in the Gold Cup is officially eliminated
Yep.
by Guatemala. Elias, we said on this show that FIFA rankings don't matter until they do. That's the truth, right? Nobody really talks about it. They're like, those are rankings, Andy. Oh, those are rankings, Elias. Nobody cares about those things. Those could be anything. However, Guatemala was ranked 106, even lower than Curacao, which we spoke about last week, right? So that tie game,
Yeah.
Canada still ranked 30. Elias, give me your instant reaction. How do you like penalties?
I've always hated penalties.
Hate
I hate
penalties.
penalties. Hockey, soccer doesn't matter. I've always had a beef with penalties and had just nothing but shit experiences with them. And this is just another one in a long line of you hear that, Canada? You can't hurt me. Penalties already I'm already numb to them. So, but no. Yeah, penalty shootouts I find are such an upsetting way to resolve a game, especially when you don't have extra time before it. I understand, some tournaments that's the format, that's whatever. This is an interconfederation. This is the Euros. This is the Copa America. This is the African Cup of Nations. This is the Gold Cup. This is CONCACAF's equivalent of it. I don't understand why there's no penalties, why there's no extra time. Sorry, in an elimination game, whatever CONCACAF is going to CONCACAF, but let's be honest here. I'm not going to sit here and excuse a performance because Canada didn't have the chance to win the game in extra time. So,
Canada had their
yeah,
chances. Yeah.
fuck penalties. But in case the last 2 minutes didn't really encapsulate that feeling.
Canada had their chances, Elias. Canada did have their chances. That's not an excuse for it, right? They had their chances.
Yep.
They've not only had the chances tonight today, but they've had their chances in the past to make a
They
statement, and
have.
they just continue stumbling over their own performances. What were your overall thoughts of the game? Because there was a red card, right? There was a penalty, a red card for Canada. Uh, there was a penalty that allowed Canada to score that goal, but there were also a lot of close calls for Canada throughout
Yeah.
the game. What are your overall thoughts?
My overall thoughts are honestly, they deserve every single bit of this result.
Mm.
100%. They deserve every bit of this. Um, Tate's commenting that Canada will be fine, and that the U.S. are down 1-0. That's, I mean, you know, silver lining. But
Yay!
Canada, Canada will be fine. Is nowhere near ambitious enough, right? If this is a country that wants to compete on the global stage, wants to push for the top 20 in the world, wants to push, games like this have to be, like dark days in your footballing history, at least recently, right? Again, when you look at the grand scheme of things, there's been a million days worse than what just happened. But if this is your ambition to elevate yourself to a global footballing power and also be the best team in CONCACAF, we talked about it. It does, like, being the best, currently the best team in CONCACAF doesn't mean a thing when you don't have silverware in now near a quarter century. Well, it will be a quarter century by the next time the Gold Cup is played. So it doesn't real. I don't think Canada will be fine. That can't be the attitude that if fans are okay with this, or if people watching this aren't completely heartbroken because of the fact that Canada's come such a long way, that's one way to look at it. But if you're the powers that be at Canada Soccer, this is a horrifying result.
Mhm.
This is as bad as getting knocked out in the group stage. I don't care. This is as bad as getting knocked out in that group. Because, again, with all due respect to Guatemala, this is not a team that should have taken you the distance, let alone beat you. So, you know, a lot of people have to come to terms with a lot of realities that, you know, doesn't matter if Alfonso Davies is missing. Doesn't matter if Jonathan David wasn't 100% fit and had to leave halfway through the game. Doesn't matter if Sam Atakubi's not available. Doesn't matter if Steven Eustachio's not there. Moise Bombito. You have it. If you lose in the final, or if you get knocked out by the Americans, you can start throwing those excuses around and they'll hold a little bit of weight. You are playing a team that no matter what you should have beaten, right? And again, Guatemala did their thing. Everyone knew how they were going to play going into this game, and they did it remarkably well. And they had their chance and they took it, right? So I can't fault Guatemala. I have to fault Canada for this. The game was theirs to win, and they 100% dropped the ball. So at this point, you know, you can, once the shock wears off, you can start dissecting different players' performances. You could start discussing the coaching staff and Jesse Marsh's performance, because I think that needs a heavy look in terms of just squad selection and overall game management. And honestly, I think, again, the World Cup is in a year. This needs a top to bottom rework in 12 months. And on top of that, you've got friendlies to play and you've got preparations to make for this tournament.
I think it's also part of what we saw in this Gold Cup is that transition where, and we've spoken on this show before, even with Hadi, we spoke about it, how there is a certain transition of the CanMNT national team, kind of setting a standard as to where they want to be moving forward, what kind of team, how seriously they want to be taken in the soccer world when it comes to the World Cup or any kind of trophies that come in the way. And right now, I think for a lot of fans, there's been that kind of honeymoon phase, Elias, where they're saying, like, oh, that's so cool. We got a really good coach. Oh, that's so cool. We have so many players that are coming into Canada. So there's been a lot of happy-go-lucky
Mhm.
moments where everybody's like, oh, great. We're doing better, Elias, than we were doing before. Because before it was such a shit show. But now we're better. That's what they would say. But right now, in this Gold Cup, after this loss, it's no longer about like, oh, it's okay, it's better than before. No, it's not okay. Now is when you have to say it's not okay to lose these games. These need to be winnable. Canada needs to, not even go to penalties. They should be beating these kind of teams 5-0. Again, Elias, we talk about rankings. Rankings don't matter. They don't. You can be ranked the number 1 or you can rank number 10. At the end of the day, what matters is when the whistle blows, what goes on the field. But it does matter sometimes when it's that drastic of a change. So I think right now, what Canada needs to realize and the Canadian fan needs to realize is that the honeymoon phase is over for this team. And they really need to start taking serious steps. I mean, if Jesse Marsh is going to the post-game conference saying, I'm not going to lie, guys, we were missing half of our team, but I don't want to use that as an excuse, then why do you mention it? Why do you say it if you don't want to use it as an excuse? In any case, it's a transition, but it needs to be done ASAP because, as you mentioned, Elias, the World Cup is a year away, and we say a year away. A lot of things can happen in 1 year, but a year is gonna be 2 months. It's gonna feel like 2 months, and next week, Elias, is gonna feel like we're starting the World Cup. That's just the truth, and things need to shape up real quick. what would you have liked to see from Canada in this competition? Is there anything that you like that you saw that you would have rather be like, oh, I would have rather see besides obviously them get to the
No,
finals, the
I want
obvious,
to
right?
see his silverware, man.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't care about anything else. No, no, seriously, it's results. It's, again, you look at, teams that go far in competitions. I'm talking about world class teams now that go far in competitions, that do well, that get to a semifinal, get to a final of a major tournament. And it's not necessarily always the flashiest thing. Yeah, sure, there are games where they play well, like a 6-0 win. And there's games where they see out a game comfortably. And even though it's not the flashiest, it's, a 2-0 win against El Salvador. It's not, it was boring as hell, but it was done relatively painstakingly. I mean, besides the rugby of it all, but the important thing is the results, right? Canada wins this game on penalties. There's a lot of disappointment and there's a lot of eye rolling, but ultimately, you got the result. Your quality of play, and save that for friendlies. If you want to discuss how well you played but you lost, oh, we saw good things but we lost. Yeah, that's friendly mentality, right? You save that for the Canadian Shield, where you lift that and you have a whole celebration and you make T-shirts because you won a game. Like that, it looks even more ridiculous with the hindsight of you getting knocked down in the quarterfinals, right? So yeah, you could argue that the honeymoon is finished, and Robbie kind of said it, right? The honeymoon with the coach is finished. This famous, new coach bump that teams always get when a new coach, a new mentality, new formation, new everything gets installed. With national teams, it lasts a bit longer because they're not together all the time. But yeah, that honeymoon is done now. Jesse Marsh is no longer this, shiny little new toy that Canadian soccer fans have. You are a coach that is subject to criticism and subject to scrutiny. And again, he wasn't on the sideline, but nobody really believes that Jesse Marsh is not coaching this team, even when he's suspended. You have ways of communicating with the bench. You pick the lineup. You're in the meetings. You're at training. All that stuff. Jesse Marsh is still the coach. And you look at some of the selections made, and you look at some of the players that are used, and
Yeah,
it's
you got the lineup
still
there. Yeah,
yeah. Let's pull up the lineup.
yeah.
Yeah, right here. So again, in goal you have Sinclair, a back four of Richard Larea, Derek Cornelius, Luc de Fujahol, and Alistair Johnston. A midfield two of Mathieu Chouanier and Nico Seeger, Jacob Schaffelberg and Tejon Buchanan on the wings, on the left wing and right wing respectively, and then Jonathan David and Tani Olusehi up top. Right, that lineup in and of itself, you're telling me that's not a good enough lineup to win against most teams in CONCACAF, if not compete for a title for the Gold Cup. It's ridiculous. All right. The in-game management, and again, we're gonna get to Teja, we're gonna get to the red card, and we're gonna get to Jacob Schaffelberg in a minute. But the whole way that this team reacted to that happening in the second half, the entire way that they played in the second half against Curacao, um, this team does not have a second gear. It feels like, right? They're operating at a certain level in the first half. And again, up until that red card, they were doing okay. They weren't playing them off the pitch, but they were getting the job done. They were controlling the game. They were up 1-0. In the second half, I don't care if you're down to 10 men. You still have to exert a certain amount of control over the game, and they didn't.
Tell me
And
if
none
you've
of the
heard that
adjustments
before.
made,
Tell me if you've heard that one before.
none of the adjustments made did anything to fix that. Right? And it's not like you've got bad players on the bench. So now, where do you go from here, right? If you did all this work just to come up short, all of a sudden, you don't really have that much information to go off of, because this Gold Cup, essentially, you played against 80th in the world, 100th in the world, 90th in the world, and like what, 70th in the world? Something like that.
Yeah.
You've got no relevant information with regards to playing top level teams. You didn't get to play the States. You didn't get to play Saudi Arabia. You didn't get to play Mexico or Panama. You didn't play the top tier competition in this tournament. This was essentially just 4 more friendlies for Canada, of which you only won 2. So this is why it feels like a group stage loss, because you've gotten absolutely nothing out of this.
And a major part of that lineup that you showed, Elias, is a big mix of MLS players and as well as European players, players that are
Mhm.
playing in bigger leagues. And then we're talking about a red card, right, by Jacob Schaffelberg. Um, yeah, is this team the kind of team you want to head into the World Cup? Like, is this the kind of roster we should be expecting in the next few months to kind of define what this team is going to look like in a bigger competition like that of next year, where they have Canada simply has to show their best set of players, right? Um, yeah, is this a big blow? Do you find to the progress that the team has been making all these years moving forward, and gathering all this talent and making them, a lot of them, jump to Europe? Do you think this loss in the Gold Cup, this elimination this early on in the competition, is a big blow to the progress of the
It's a
national
blow
team?
to the progress because you haven't made any,
Oh,
right?
okay.
Jesse Marsh didn't really experiment the lineup. Yeah, Taniel Osei had a pretty decent tournament, and you saw some good things out of him. But Nico Seeger had a pretty decent tournament, and you saw some good things out of him. But besides that, what really did you learn? That Dane St. Clair isn't reliable in the penalty shootout? You already know that. That Luc de Fougerolles is a pretty good center back, and that he just took a really crappy penalty. Yeah, you already knew that. Derek Cornelius is still a stud. Mathieu Chouanière is still very strong. Nico Seeger, again, good to know. Jonathan David, you already knew everything about John. You didn't learn anything new from Jonathan David in this tournament. And Tejon Buchanan, well, that was a nice return to form. And if you want to talk about a tournament MVP, it has to be Tejon Buchanan. It has to be. He was him. And again, I'll give my flowers to Nico Seeger, who was more of a revelation than necessarily an MVP, where he kind of showed up and then made a spot for himself in the 11. But Tejon Buchanan was finally as advertised. Right under John Herdman, he was a wingback in a 3 or 5 back system, and he looked out of position. You super unfortunate broken leg, kind of takes you out of competition for a while. You struggle to get your form back because again you've broken your leg, and so this was really the first time in a couple years that Taylor Buchanan was on the field for the national team and looked every bit the promising winger that he was. So he was definitely my MVP. I think that if anyone could come out of this tournament with absolutely nothing to complain about or hang your head or to be criticized about, it's Tatum Buchanan. He did all the running required of him. He did all the defensive work. He did more than enough defensive work, given that the opposition they played. And again, he was dangerous every time he was on the ball. And so I loved the work that Tatum Buchanan did. I think that again, there wasn't much competition on his right side. I don't think anyone really holds a candle to him, but it's nice to see that there's no complacency, at least on his end, where he wasn't like, I'm obviously the guy on the right, so I can just kind of, do my thing. And then, no, he put in the work. He was doing the running. He was doing all the nitty gritty that you would expect of him, and then some. So honestly, hats off to Tejon Buchanan because he is, yeah, by far was the best player through all 4 games this tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that kind of
Defense.
needs to become the norm when it comes to performances in the national team, right? Because someone like Buchanan that plays in Europe, when they come back to a national team, they need to play at that next level. They need to play at that next level in the competition to be able to display. So it's good to see that, but that can't just be one player. It needs to be the whole team, and you'll only be able to see that once everybody has the wheels rolling, and everybody is showing that MVP caliber. Now, on the other side of the coin, Elias, you talked about Tejon Buchanan playing like the MVP that he can be. Who was the most disappointing of this tournament? Besides, let's not talk about the team, okay? Let's talk about
Yeah.
individual players.
Oh,
Who would you have said, like, I wanted to
this
see?
hurts my heart to say, but Jacob Schaffelberg
Mm,
was a complete non-factor whenever he was on the field. Yes, he drew the penalty against El Salvador, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and yeah, you did a good job there. Like that was a good moment, but as a whole, massively underwhelmed, especially given the performances he was giving in Copa America and all this hype that was surrounded him because he had kind of exploded in terms of productivity. He was he essentially completely shut down that left wing because he was nowhere near conducive enough to the attack. He was holding up play. He wasn't getting his dribbles off. He wasn't really getting in behind like he should be. Every single thing that you expect of Jacob Schauberg, he wasn't really doing. And then on top of that, one of the dumbest red cards I've seen from the national team in a long time, where he kind of just, man, there's 30 seconds left in the half. The ball has gone all the way out to midfield, and you just run through a guy, knowing full well that you're already on a yellow.
Yeah. What are we doing?
For what?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
absolutely no need to do that. There was no footballing reason. There was no emergency, and the ball was already gone. And you had, it's not like, oh, he got rid of the ball and he cut in front of me and my shoulder. No, you went out of your way. We all saw it. You went out of your way to put your shoulder through him. Completely unnecessary. And so in doing that right before halftime, you've given Guatemala life, because they go into halftime now only losing 1-0, but they have a man up. You give them a little bit of hope, because now they have the chance to go into the locker room for 15 minutes and regroup, knowing what's going to happen in the second half, that you're coming out with extra man. And also, you now have to make a significant tactical change, because, again, you're down a man. You have to change formation. You have to go to a 4-4-1. You have to, make concessions where you should not be making concessions against a team like this. So I'm not going to make him at fault for the goal, because,
Yeah.
I think Dane Sinclair was a little bit late on that, but you definitely set the pretext for a goal like that happening. So yeah, Jacob Schaffelberg, as much as I love Jacob Schaffelberg, and I love me some Jacob Schaffelberg, he's super disappointing this tournament.
Yeah. And I think this tournament is the perfect opportunity, Elias, for players like Jacob Schaffelberg that needs this, that knows that clubs are watching these games to see potential talent. And he is a young Canadian talent that has always been labeled with a lot of the potential that plays in the MLS. He should have had a perfect tournament. He should have had a tournament where he stands out. Yes, you said he had flashes here and there that he did that, were good and did well, but it's not enough. It should have been more, and it should have been the kind of tournament that kind of puts him on the limelight to be able to take that jump to Europe.
There should have been the continuation of Copa America.
There you go.
Right? There should have been okay, this wasn't a flash in the pan. This is confirmation, and it wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely. What's next? What's next for Canada? I mean, where do we go from here? Because right now, lies the way we feel, and I think a lot of our probably listeners feel, is what the hell just happened, and where do we go from here?
I think it's gone to the point now, and this is probably going to be my mentality until the send-off games. Those 2 send-off games that are going to happen in Montreal right before the World Cup, where I'm expecting world-class opposition. Up until that, so basically for the next 10 or 11 months, words don't mean anything anymore. You have no right to say anything. You have no right to boast. You have no right to label yourself anything beyond a team still trying to get to the next level. You're not at the next level. You are so far away from the next level, both in terms of football and quality, consistent football and quality, but also just in terms of mentality. Because every single time you play against CONCACAF teams, you get rattled still. Not this isn't a case of we're better than them and we should be beating them. This is a case of I still don't know how to actually comport myself as a world-class team. We talked about this a bit after Curacao, where they're still not used to the fact that they are one of the top dogs. Well, newsflash, you're not a top dog yet. Yeah. And this entire tournament just reconfirmed what you were trying to disprove. So for the next 10, 11 months, I don't want to hear a word from anybody. Just put your head down, work, and you better come into the World Cup. And again, those send-off games, because they will be in Montreal, and I'm expecting a lot of really good things. You better come out firing. And you better come out with the best possible 11. Because with all due respect, if I see Kyle Larin start another game, another important game for this national team, I'm going to lose my shit.
Losing my shit.
I'm going to lose my shit.
No, but it's definitely is one of those moments where it's like, I was watching after the game the One Soccer interview. They they stopped St. Clair on his way to the locker room, and they're like, "How are you feeling?" And
How do you
he
think I
just
feel, man?
his responses, Elias, were very robotic. Honestly, I should have shared it here, but it was very robotic, raw emotions where he's like, he really seemed, Elias, like just like you and I, as if they interviewed us right after we just saw death or something. He just seemed like, I don't know what to say. I'm just gonna say what I'm supposed to say, and I need to hide as soon as possible. It just was very
That's
raw.
the media. That's the media training. That's
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not too surprised
exactly.
by
But
that.
it just seemed like it was raw emotion where he was like, I just don't know. Even as much as media training as you get, Elias, like you still see some raw emotion where he's just like, I don't know what just happened. I don't know what we just said. It doesn't feel real. But I mean, look, it's. I think everybody has to take this moment, include from the top to bottom in the national team, to look at themselves in the mirror and say, where do we go from here? Because time is running out quickly before the World Cup, which is the biggest stage in the world, which is very, very important for a lot of young talent that is looking to make that jump to bigger leagues and bigger teams. They need to start seeing where did it go wrong. You're not gonna tell me that the Jesse Marsh suspension was the wrong thing. You're not gonna tell me
No,
that a red card was what went wrong. You're not gonna tell me that, oh, he missed that penalty, that was the end. No, there's something more to this. There's something more, and it needs to be looked at from top to bottom. Where did it go wrong? Was it 6 months ago? Was it 2 hours ago? Was it 12 months ago? When did it start going wrong? We need to, as you said, Elias, be carry ourselves like a world class team, not a team that matches the level of who we're facing in front, right?
yeah.
So, very important next few months. Next few months, Jesus. Very, very important next few months, man, because honestly, it's going to come back quick. All right, guys. Just I wanted to give you guys a quick reminder to click on the subscribe button if you like what you see on whichever platform you're listening to us from. We're on Spotify, we're on Instagram, we're on YouTube, we're everywhere. If you like what you hear, make sure to follow us on all social media platforms for daily updates on everything CF Montreal, Roses FC, and Canada Soccer. While you're at it, make sure to follow Elias and I in every platform. We're on X, we're on Blue Sky, we're on everywhere. One follow or subscription to our Patreon helps out the show a lot. Speaking of our Patreon, Elias, next up, we were able to have one of the Roses FC players, Lucy Capodana, that joined us this week for an interview where she discussed a bit about her past, present, and future. She sat down with you, Elias, during the week. Here's a sneak peek of the interview, which will be released on our Patreon tomorrow and available to all those that are subscribed. So make sure to sign up today. Go ahead, Elias.
Lucy, before I let you go, we have a tradition at the Balls Round. Whoever we speak to, we do a little bit of a rapid fire segment, a little bit of this to that, a little bit of just a question off the cuff. Don't really think about it. Just give us your answer straight up. And yeah, we're gonna start. So, last second buzzer beater or walk off game winning field goal.
Buzzer beater.
Goal line clearance or pocketing an attacker.
Goal line clearance.
Team in the NSL right now that you think is your biggest rival?
Toronto.
Mia Hamm or Alex Morgan?
Mia Hamm.
Funniest player on the team?
Charlotte Bilbo.
Player that you would go on a cross-country road trip with?
To Julia Leese and Tanya Boychuk. They would love it.
Who gets the aux in the locker room?
B.
You.
Or Julia, but B.
Who's got the worst music taste on the team?
This might be controversial. Ooh, worst music taste. Not enough people share their music, so maybe Julia. But she doesn't have bad music taste, but I don't know.
Who's the best dressed? Who's got the best game day fit?
Charlotte Bilbo. Oh no, Meg Salve.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Toughest forward to play against in training?
Ooh. This is Noemi.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Lucy
Capodana.
Like a true central defender, unafraid of throwing anybody on the bus. You asked her who has the aux. She was like, me.
Absolutely.
Didn't even
Absolutely.
think of. So tell us, you're the one that sat down with her. I was off,
Yeah.
somewhere. Where the hell was I last week? Anyways, um,
Vacation, man.
I don't know where I was. I'm not sure where I am today, and I'm not sure where I was last week. Anyways, tell us a little bit how did the interview go? What were what were some of
Oh
your
yeah, it was super nice. Spoke about, growing up in a family of athletes, of top level athletes, how crazy that can get. NCAA, we talked about being a multi-sport athlete,
football?
that
Football.
football and basketball as
Yeah.
well. And also you're starting a whole new club from scratch, right? We spoke to Marinette Pichon a couple months ago, right before the Roses home opener, and she talked a bit about the administrative side. Here, you're going to get a more of what goes into the footballing side of starting a club from scratch, because it's an entirely different world than what Marinette talked about. You have to basically learn a culture and a tactical system and everything that you have no foundation on. You kind of have to build it as you go. And the fact that they were able to have so much success this season off the bat is really, it's an impressive thing. We go into that a little bit, but yeah, super awesome interview. She's an athlete through and through. She's one of those people that she wasn't playing soccer, she would be doing something else in sports.
Yeah, she
So
honestly, yeah,
yeah,
fantastic, great.
super super good. And again, thank you so much to Roses for setting this up, and thank you to Lucy for taking the time. And yeah, hopefully we can have some more Roses players on here, because they seem like really interesting and really awesome people.
Definitely super excited to bring you guys more content like that. Like I said a little bit earlier, make sure to sign up to our Patreon, and you'll be able to see the full interview tomorrow. It was a fantastic interview, and thank you so much, Elias, for doing that, and the Roses FC for setting that up. All right, we get to move on to
Yeah,
bigger and
silence, some good news.
some
Oh my
good
god.
news. Wait, before the good news, we gotta talk about
Oh,
the last one. Right? So
shit in this
don't
house.
don't wipe the tears away yet.
We can't have
So,
shit.
so midweek, I know a lot of people forgot about that this morning, but midweek, CF Montreal played against FC Cincinnati, and they lost. It was a terrible loss that I don't even want to go deep into the lies. I'm so sorry. I'd rather forget
It,
about
it,
it.
it was like 5 days ago. We won't. Let's not go too deep into it.
What is it? It was. I mean, look. Did you have any takeaways from from the loss?
Yeah.
I'll give you my takeaways, but go ahead.
Yeah. That it. Simply put, this is probably the first time. Again, I'm not counting the Toronto game, because the Toronto game exists outside of space and time. But this was the first time in the season where, for 90 whole minutes, 75 minutes, they were completely played off the pitch. They were not even playing the same sport, let alone being in the same league as them. Cincinnati showed Montreal the level required to be a competitive team in MLS, and they did it mercilessly. Both sides of the ball in all three phases of play. Every single blade of grass that was touched for, again, like 75 minutes out of the 90, Cincinnati was better. And they were ruthless. They were absolutely ruthless. I think that, honestly, game like that, if that's not a wake-up call in terms of, top to bottom, this lineup needs improvement, I don't know what is. Because it
You
was
said
laid bare in front of you, right? It was like, here, this is one of the best teams in MLS for the last 4 years. You're nowhere near as good as them right now.
Seriously, Elias, you said something that kind of triggered me there. You said blades of grass. Ah. It triggered. I'm sorry,
The
Elias. It
one
triggered
still
me.
stuck to the ground.
I was literally waiting for Elias to finish his take to say my take, but then he said blades of grass, and I was like, memories of last night of the grass flying in chunks and yeah. So, kind of agree with what you're saying. Actually, I completely agree with what you're saying. Elias, usually during the games we give our personal takes, what we think during the game, the X's and O's,
Yeah.
and this. Elias, it was simple. FC Cincinnati is on another level. It's on another level, and they outclassed Montreal by far. I'm not saying, usually in games we try to be something positive, some things that we saw like, the defense played well, maybe they need a little bit more attacking, this player did this and that. No, it was a bad game for CF Montreal. Maybe And with 11v11, it wasn't like we can say there was a yellow card. No, this guy was injured. Yeah, okay, no. Jalen Neal and George Campbell, who we praised so much for their performances in Houston in the past, were nowhere near the center backs that we had seen in the past few weeks. Overall, just outclassed, and it kind of showed the results of everything we've been seeing this month, where it's just like FC Cincinnati is clearly a team that has their shit together. They've been doing it over the years. They've developed it. They even lost a major piece of their team, Elias. They lost why am I blanking on his name now?
Lucho.
Lucho, yes, Lucho, and they still played like
I mean, when you replace
next
Lucho
level.
with someone like Evander, who's so again, this was the first time I got to see Evander in the flesh, right? See him play in Portland, and he's incredible, but he's out west. Montreal doesn't see him. He came to just seeing the way he's so good, and he's playing at an MVP level, right? So when you lose an MVP and you replace him with a player playing at an MVP level, it softens the blow. Like imagine you lose Georgi Mihailovic and you replace him with somebody who scores 20 goals and gets 10 assists. All of a sudden, I don't miss Georgi Mihailovic so much.
Yeah.
What a concept.
But exactly, they seem to, as a franchise in the past few years, I'm not just talking about this season, in the past few years, they just seem to have found what works for them and the way a proper team needs to be run, because they also have young players that are developing, but they really seem to have gotten so just outclassed CF Montreal. I can tell you, like, after the game, because like as you mentioned, I was out of vacation. I was just like, what do I say? Is there anything really to say about the game? Not really. They were just outclassed. But then they played again last night. But one thing before I get into last night's game, besides the loss, CF Montreal did take another hit on the injury list, where they lost both Caden Clark and Jalen Neal in the game to injury. Neal's injury seems a little bit. We don't. I don't know if we've gotten an update as to how long he'll be out, but
he's in a walking boot.
he's in a walking boot, right?
King Clark was walking around yesterday normally. Maybe he's not necessarily 100% fit, but he was walking around. He wasn't limping. He wasn't in a boot or anything. Jalen Neal was in a full-on walking boot.
Yeah.
So
it looks like we're going to be losing him for a bit. Of Caden Clark or Jalen Neal, who's the biggest loss? I know that's such a terrible question to ask, but it almost feels, Elias, like every game that CF Montreal is playing in the next few months, in the next few weeks, is a must-win, with no exception. And when you're talking about every game is a must-win, it also means that you can't lose key pieces like a Caden Clark or a Jalen Neal, because you need the perfect lineup every game.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What do you think of those two losses, and which one do you think could, impact this team the most?
If you go off this season, Jalen Neal has been the better player, and losing him is unfortunate. But if you look at who's there to replace him, and we'll get into about it a little bit later, right? Yeah. Fernando Alvarez was all right. Brendan Craig had a good game, right, against New York. There's nobody to replace Caden Clark. Mahalo Poku's not there, right? Not at that level. Jean-Anthony Vilsaint, again, it's his second good substitute cameo in as many games, but again, not at the level for 60 to 70 minutes that's required, because again, you don't know if he's reliable to stay healthy for 60 or 70 minutes. Bryce Duke is not there. Eddie Sinchuk is not there. Fabian Herbers is not there. I'm running out of names. Owen Graham Roche, you all of a sudden you have to delve into changing tactics completely, and you're no longer playing with a 10 or a false 9 or a second striker. You're playing with two strikers up top, two proper attackers up top. So Caden Clark is the bigger loss because there's nobody else. You have to completely change the tactics.
And it's kind of weird because we've discussed it on this show, because Caden Clark, as talented as a player as he can be, as I was actually, it went into my Instagram feed, his goal last year against NYCFC, ironically enough, where he beat out a player. And the point being is, even last year, it almost felt like he didn't really have a position, because he's not a natural winger. He's not a natural 10. He's not a natural striker. He's said this in several press conferences, that being a 9 is not his most natural position. But you lose him, and Elias, you're saying there's nobody to replace him. but he doesn't even really have a position. Almost like a Thomas Mueller, nowhere near the level of Thomas Mueller, but a player that just kind of does stuff around the field that is very productive, but doesn't have a defined position, which is such a rare gem to find. But at the same time, like you said, you lose them, and what do you do now? Do you go back to a basic lineup that you've always done? So
You have to.
yeah,
You're forced to, right? We can go into the lineup now if you like.
yeah. Let's go into it.
Because that is the reality of the situation, right? In nets, you got Jonathan Sirois, then you got a back four of Luke Petrasso, Brendan Craig, who gets his first MLS start with CF Montreal, George Campbell, and David Bugay. Then you have Tom Pierce and Dante Sealy, who are on the left and right wing, respectively. Samuel Piet and Victor Laturi are in the midfield. And then you don't have a 10. You've got two proper strikers in Prince Wusu and Owen Graham Roche, who, again, shout out Owen Graham Roche, who first MLS start and beats out his teammate Alexander Guboglu for the youngest starter in MLS in club history.
Incredible.
Alexander Guboglu broke the record in March, and Graham Roche took the record from him a couple months later. So again, congratulations on him. But you look at this lineup, and it's now a completely different scheme. You don't have a 10 anymore. You have Owusu and Graham Roche up there that are, again, proper strikers working in tandem.
Yeah. So let's. I know you showed the lineup, and we're gonna move on to the funner part of the. No, man, it's not the funner part. It's the win, the
Slightly
win
happier.
part, the win part of the podcast. CF Montreal gets their first win at Stade Saputo last night versus NYCFC for their third win of the season. Fortunately, they stay at the bottom of the table. Didn't really make a move there. But who cares?
So it's all about creating separation with LA Galaxy, man. Now it's a 2-point lead.
LA
It's all about
Galaxy
creating
lost.
separation.
That's true. LA Galaxy
They
lost.
drew.
yesterday.
They drew against San Jose, I think.
Yeah.
So now they're 2 points up.
Yeah. Hey, Elias, you know what? When I went to the podcast of one of the guys that covers Edgar, that covers LA Galaxy, this was maybe I want to talk maybe a month ago now that we do, and they were already in crap. And he was telling me, like, you know, Andy, at this point, I'm just numb. I feel nothing after every even a win. I feel nothing, and I was like, I almost wanted to tell him like I feel the same, but I didn't. I was like, I still have. Maybe I'm a psychopath. I don't know, but I have a little bit of hope that there's gonna be something on this, you know. But anyways, yes, it was a win. 3 points, very necessary 3 points for the morale. Elias, in your opinion, was this CF Montreal's best game this season so far of the 2025 campaign?
No.
Okay.
Best home game, yeah, obviously the bar is in the toilet. But best overall game, I still think belongs to Houston. That was a complete performance from start to finish. Even when they were conceding possession, there were no like that was just all around full marks to everybody. Good job. But this is a close second. This is a very close second. I think this is a much better game than this is a much better game than the 1-0 win against New York City at Yankee Stadium. I think this is a better game than the draw in Chicago. I think it's a better game than some of those better moments. Just because of the fact that they did it with such a paper thin roster, and also the fact that defensively, when the going got tough, they were resolute. They were very confident when they entered that low block, and they kind of shut the door at in the last 15-20 minutes. So again, very impressive performance with not arguably definitely a makeshift squad, a makeshift performance.
Yeah, I think this was CF Montreal's best game in this campaign, given the circumstances. As you mentioned, a very small bench, a lineup
5 outfielders, man, on the bench.
Yeah,
5 outfielders.
Yeah, you just lost Jalen Neal. You lost Caden Clark. You lost Giacomo Vrioni. You have 2 guys. Well, Nathan Saliba has been traded. We'll talk about that later, but it has been transferred, and Joel Waterman is not there either. But the point being is, given the circumstances, last night the team I saw was a team that played in unison, that played cohesive soccer, where they actually really, every player in that field did their part properly. They did it right, which led it to a win. I honestly think they should have probably won 2-0, 3-0. I know Julian Anthony Valsain almost scored a goal as well. That was just wide. And there were a few other instances, right? And but also to be fair, NYCFC almost scored that goal. Elias, we were losing our minds in the press box when they were looking at VAR. And Luca Petros also mentioned that in the post-game conference. He was like, yeah, I didn't want to start the game that way. I was really hoping that wasn't a goal. But the point being is, I really liked, as you mentioned, their response to every situation. Every situation, they just seem so confident. NYCFC never stopped pressuring up high. They kept pressuring. They kept bringing the pressure, and they kept, they wouldn't stop like bringing their game. And it was really, really important for CF Montreal to continue, because we've seen this in the past where the moment Marco Donadel made subs, it's almost like the level dropped massively. But yesterday, it just felt like it stayed the same throughout the game, and that was very important for the first home win at Stade Saputo. What were some of your takeaways from last night's game? Positive or negative?
There weren't many negatives. Again, I'm
How about
still.
the grass?
Well, if you want to talk about the grass, we'll talk about the grass. The grass, the grass looks and played like grass that had just been installed, hadn't been rained on for 2 weeks, and then got a shit ton of rain in like 24 hours right before you play on it.
Horrible.
Coincidentally, that's exactly what happened to the grass. But honestly, yeah, but Luca Petrasso also said it in the presser, right? The grass sucked for both teams, so you can't really complain. It was getting dug up. At one point, the ball took a massive bounce on a piece of grass that was like sticking. Another point, I forget. I think it was Victor Laturi who walked near a divot, and you just see him drop like 2 inches because there was a piece of grass that got kicked
Cheat
up,
code.
and they fixed it in like 2 seconds. But someone's gonna blow out an ankle or an ACL on that thing.
Yeah.
So like, look, I'm happy it got rained on so that some of the roots can take and it can firm up a little bit. They don't have a game for a week, so hopefully the grounds crew can solidify the field. But yeah, that was super annoying. But besides that, honestly, it wasn't negative, but it was a little bit I don't want to say damning, but it's kind of a confirmation that Tom Pierce, as good as his ability and his left foot is, really can only provide that one thing. He was trying to do some other stuff and it more or less worked, but I mean, his defensive work is improving. I think now the fact that he doesn't have the ultimate responsibility of being the left-sided defender, the left back, he seems to have taken a weight off his shoulders, because as a winger / wide midfielder, defensively he's a lot less of a liability. But going forward, he doesn't provide any of that danger and that creativity that someone like Dante Sealy or someone like Hennady Sinchuk or someone even like Caden Clark,
Mahala Poku.
Yeah, Mahala Poku too, will provide, right? Mahala Poku this season has look, let's call a spade a spade. Mahala Poku this season has not been the Mahala Poku we know and love for whatever reason, right? But Tom Pierce, on the other hand, has had good moments, and again, he had a good ball in. He had some very good crosses that was asking real questions of the New York defense. The only problem is, if that's not where he's set up, with the ball at his feet, out wide, with people running into the area, he can't do a whole lot else other than kind of just continue to recycle the ball. Mm-hmm. So, again, it's not damning, but it is kind of almost a close case on what he can and cannot do. And I think when everyone is healthy, he is a luxury substitute at the end of the game when you need a goal. Yeah, I think that's the extent of what he can bring when you have 25 people available to you.
Yeah, and that's actually something I was asking Elias in the press box. I was like, what is Tom Pierce's position? I mean, go to FIFA and go to FIFA and one of the members told me he's a crosser. That's his position. He's a crosser, and it's like, we can laugh at the end of the day. We can laugh about it, but what is his position? At some point, I think yesterday, due to circumstances, he actually went up as a striker. He was the highest guy on the field. And even then, you're seeing Tom Pierce as a striker, and you're like, yeah, boy, I don't know what he's doing there. You're not really sure what he's doing in the middle of the field. So it's kind of a weird way. Now, another one takeaway that I had, because we've talked about in this pod a lot, is again George Campbell. Such an impressive game.
So
So, Elias, we spoke about after the game. There was a moment when I think it was the 92nd minute. Everybody's exhausted. Both teams are just looking for the game to finish.
but
He
not George
takes the
Campbell.
ball. He takes the ball, Elias, from box to box, sprinting full speed. I forgot what happened at the end. I think they missed the pass or they missed the shot or whatever. He ran. And this is, again, we've spoken on this show, and I've said it over and over again. George Campbell, to me, and I've seen it in practice plenty of times, the way he practices, the way he plays, it's not MLS level. It's next level to me. This is the way I see it. He is a man amongst boys. But he's still human. And yesterday, and this is something we would have remembered today and we would have been discussing today if it had ended up in a goal, because he actually made a very bad back pass to Jonathan Sirois. I forgot at what minute it was. I
Yeah,
think it was the first half.
like the 10-15 minutes in. Yeah.
Yeah, he made a very bad, and again, he's human. Players are human, but it's just kind of those things that it becomes a bad highlight reel, a blooper for you when you're in your reel, when you're, especially in these moments when you're having almost excellent game after game, and it really is one of those that really, I guess, a takeaway. Another takeaway would be that it's that I think it was one of Brandon Craig. I absolutely loved his performance. I want to talk a little bit more about him a little later, but I absolutely love that. Again, you don't feel the level dropping too much when Craig takes the field. And that's important because, Elias, if we're talking about the beginning of the season, Brandon Craig is not even second or third in that depth chart. He's maybe fourth, fifth, with all the talent that we had healthy at that point, right? I mean, in what world, Elias, would you have said that Brandon Craig is starting over Fernando Alvarez?
Yeah, that's true.
And it's just, especially after the rumors that he had last season, Alvarez had last season, right? And he only came in as a trialist, which is something I asked him. What did you think as a trialist coming to his team? And now you play your first full 90-minute game. What's going on in your head right now? What do you think of this? Did you think of that? He obviously gave a very humble answer, like it's something I've always worked with, but I believe in this club. But it's still very impressive. Do you think Brandon Craig is maybe a viable solution to replace, say, an injured Neil, other than say Alvarez or Waterman? Now that he might be coming back, he'll be coming back on Saturday's game.
He'll be available for. No, he has a suspension to serve. He won't even be available.
I'm dead.
He'll have a suspension to serve because he didn't serve it. It doesn't count when you
That's
serve it on
so
an international
true.
break.
When will Nathan Saliba, do his some suspension MLS? Maybe next. Anyways, so is he? Well, we don't really have a choice now for Saturday, but whenever Joel Waterman is available, if Neil, however long he's out for, do you think Brandon Craig deserves a start over those two?
I think Waterman's going to get it just because of his standing and his experience. What you are going to see now is kind of what you saw when Fernando Alvarez took over for Joel Waterman when he was injured / on international break. Because he went on an international break, then got injured right after, and he ended up missing like a month of MLS. If you make the position your own, you may come back to missing a spot. And that's what happened, basically. Right? Fernando Alvarez kind of showed up. He made the spot his own last year. And he shoehorned himself into the conversation for who gets to go on that side of the defense. And look, Brandon Craig had one good game. I don't think it's enough to kind of say, oh, he starts over Waterman. Or, that's the replacement for Neil if Neil's out long term. But Jalen Neal has done enough to put himself in that conversation. Unfortunately, he's injured and he's now out of that conversation. When Joel Waterman comes back, right, for the Forge game, most likely, because that is a must-win game and you will put your best 11, it will be him and not Brandon Craig, I'm assuming, because as good as Brandon Craig was, Joe Waterman is of a higher standing in this team. And, he hasn't been outstanding this year, but he has not done enough to lose his spot to someone who had one good game yet. But what this does for Brandon Craig is two things. It shows that I can play in either position that Marco Donadella asks of me. And I will likely, because of that, be the first until they sign a replacement for Nathan Saliba. I will be the first person off the bench for any midfield or defensive substitutions. So he's now built himself a niche where he operates in a reliable manner. Because again, you look at the game against Cincinnati when he came on, the game was virtually done by then, but he did it well. He jumped into the midfield when it was asked of him. He jumped into the defense. He jumped into wherever was people needed him to be, and he did the job. So you got to remember, he's only he's 20, 21 years old. So he's still young. He's got a pretty high upside, and he's going to now be getting more and more minutes. So absolutely, I think this is a great start. I don't think he gets in the lineup over Joe Waterman though.
Yeah, I mean, Joel Waterman has had his good and his bad here in Montreal, but absolutely, like in these kind of must-win games, like the Forge game, you do want to put your best out there that you can almost what to expect. Because I think at this point, I think most people know what to expect of Joel Waterman, right? There's no surprises with him. You know what he brings to the field, and I think Marco Donadel is starting to stick a little more to that, to players that he knows what to expect of them. Victor Latorre. Let's talk about Victor Latorre last night.
What a game.
Had the game of his life last night. Oh, he was. Forget the goal. Forget the goal.
What a game.
He had a game of his life. Now, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. But how important was his game last night, given the circumstances that Nathan Saliba has just been transferred to Anderlecht? What is your thoughts on that? How important was his game last night?
Victor Latorre's kind of made his. We're talking about niches, right? Especially people coming into this squad looking to find space for themselves. He made his niche. I can come off the bench, or I can start in a reliable way that's not, out of this world, but I will not actively be a liability. Last night, he was reliable, but last night he was every single bit of the, quote unquote, replacement for Samuel Piet that he was brought in to be, right? Initially, it was thought that he would be the person to, come in when Samuel Piet needed to rotate out for fitness or for squad rotation or for whatever. And what he's done over the last couple months is make himself borderline indispensable, whether it's because Nathan Saliba is not available or it's because no one can physically do the amount of work that he's doing. Like just I think he's got the best engine I've seen on this team since Juan. He just doesn't stop running. He never stops running, and it's incredible. The goal was very nice, and he put himself in a great spot, and it was well finished and everything like that.
Shot was fantastic.
And into the bottom corner, as expected, of a player, of a professional footballer. That was good, but the ball recoveries, the transition, the ground he covered, the fact that he was basically, him and Piet were glued to Max Morales and just had to cover up so much space to kind of effectively nullify just how lethal he is at distributing the ball. Because again, he's pushing 40. He's not going to be running all that much. But the ground that you have to cover to kind of make up for just how lethal his vision is was excellent. And Robbie says, good match. I'm not convinced he's a regular player. You need to, I agree with the fact that you need to see multiple games at this level. But the fact that he's kind of showed that his ceiling at 23 years old is potentially that high, if not higher, right? There was still some moments I think he could have done a little bit better. It's a great start to your time at this club. Because this is one of those players, I don't think Montreal is buying this player because they see, we brought this guy in for whatever, and we're gonna sell him for like $5 million back to Europe. Like, no, this is a guy that's gonna be brought in because he's a reliable role player and he will do the job at an MLS level, if not hopefully higher, for a couple years. And so, yeah, you still need to show a certain amount of consistency, but this is a wonderful start if this is kind of like, if this can become commonplace and not just an outlier.
And that's what I think, and it goes beyond that because I know you talked about Victor Lotori's, his engine and the way, but the physicality that he showed yesterday with players, fearless in duels amongst bigger players. He was jumping so high for headers, or whether it was that second ball or trying to get back into give the offense a second shot. He was just nonstop, like you said, an engine, but just I've seen players in the past, Elias, that run and run and run and run, and that's all they do. There's not more to
Yeah.
it. But then there's the players that after they do all that running, they actually do something once they're in the spots. They're placed there. And that's something that Victor Lotori showed. Now, could we maybe have more to discuss about him after 5 games like that? Sort of like when we talk about George Campbell, where we're 1,000% convinced, I think, Elias, in this pod, that he's ready for that next step. Absolutely. But he had a tremendous game yesterday, and he
Yes.
was a big part. And again, forget about the goal he scored. It goes beyond that. If you watch the full 90 minutes of this game, he almost played an excellent game. Could he have done better? 100%. What player couldn't have, right? So just to finish up here, you mentioned Owen Graham Roach got his first MLS start at 17 years old. Huge accomplishment. Do you think he could be the next product that the club tries to maybe make that jump to Europe? Like we saw with Nathan Saliba, we've seen another with I want to say almost we saw with Mathieu Chouanière, but not really, kind of. But
I mean, you did see with Metro for now, just because the circumstances of him leaving aren't super pleasant,
yeah,
doesn't mean that they did, help him get to Europe.
yeah. But the reason I ask is because the whole Nathan Saliba situation, and we'll discuss it again, it is in a sense the philosophy of this club. It's not even in
Yep.
a sense; it is the philosophy of this
Yep,
club.
exactly.
And academy players are a crucial part of that process. I'm kind of based on the game yesterday because we saw. I think I saw the biggest game from him since the start of the season. In my opinion, Elias, he showed like he's not new to this world. He showed his part. Yeah, granted, was he exhausted at the end by the time he got subbed
Poor
out?
guy.
100%.
Dead.
He was exhausted, but he gave it all. He was running. I saw him at some point being all the way down to the defenders and not still making those sprints up top. But he was impressive, and I want to see more of that, Elias. I want to see more of him, like being put out there with MLS defenders and really, I've seen him in practice, Elias, but I don't know why. Yesterday, amongst maybe it's because I'm just so used to seeing everybody from CF Montreal, but against NYCFC players, he looked like a big boy. He did not look like he was an academy kid or a 17-year-old kid. He's big bodied, and if he can continue developing that, Elias, he does have a decent shot to becoming that next player that catches attention from Europe. What do you think about?
I think looking at Europe is way too early. But I do agree with you on the physicality aspect of it, because during training camp I initially thought that between him and Alexander Guboglu, he would probably get, at the start at least, more playing time, just because it seemed like he was physically more capable of handling MLS players. Like during training camp and in the scrimmages, he was holding his own against central defenders. And at the time, we also thought Jaquil Marshall-Rudy was going to be in that right wing back spot. So, I mean, if we had known, then yeah, obviously Alexander Guboglu was going to get more visibility. But yeah, I still think he needs to add some incisiveness to his game. But a lot of the time, the work ethic is absolutely there. And so at least I'm happy that, the willingness and the ability to kind of, something doesn't go your way, you're still working and you're still that kind of youthful exuberance, if you will, is absolutely there. But you can tell there were a lot of moments where you could tell he is 17 years old. Right? There were a lot of moments where you're like, okay, that's
that makes sense.
A child on the field, right? Sometimes. And so he does have a lot of experience. He needs to kind of get under his belt before you could even start to like think about any potential resale value, right? He still has to score a goal. But like he did a lot of the grunt work that it's very tough to teach strikers. Either you are that kind of striker or you're not. So the fact that he's doing that is promising. But I didn't see nearly enough of him in an attacking context. I didn't see him really take people on one-on-one dribbling. I didn't see him, get a shot on target. I didn't see, how quickly or how confidently or how efficiently he shoots. You didn't see a lot of things that will give you an idea of what kind of attacker he's going to be, right? You can only see him in training so many times. You need to see him against actual competitive opponents in a competitive setting before you can make anything definitive. You can see his quality, obviously, right? But to go and be like, okay, I actually know that you can hold your own. And as a lone striker, for example, I think it's a bit too early for that. But again, with the state of the team right now, if Bryce Duke isn't healthy, if some of the players, not just Bryce Duke, if some of the players that are still injured don't come back and aren't healthy for the Inter Miami game, you may see him start again. Because I don't think Sanusi Ibrahim is going to start. I don't think Jonathan Hussein is going to start. I don't think Mahala Poku is going to start. And that's literally everybody that's available right
Hey,
now.
but Joel Anthony Vilsaint, hasn't he given you something to like think about the past two
As a
games?
substitute, absolutely.
You think he's
Right?
a super sub?
That's two very impressive substitute appearances in a row, right? Where he's done a lot of good things, and he should have scored if not for a very nice save by I forget Romero. I think is the
Yeah,
backup
Romero. Yeah.
NYCFC goalkeeper because Freese is with the U.S. national team, but he made a very nice. It was a very nice shot, and honestly, if not for an excellent save, he's got a goal. But I don't think that he's capable of doing 70 minutes, right? Let alone forget 90 minutes. That's out of the question. But even 16, 70 minutes, I feel like you're pushing it. So him coming off the bench in the 70th or 80th minute to kind of bring in a little bit of a spark of creativity because he's one of those players that has the audacity to kind of try things. I don't hate that, but I don't think he's going to be a starter for a while
I don't
until he gets
understand. Yeah.
some consecutive weeks in a row where he doesn't get hurt.
I don't understand how a player of his talent, because I do believe he's very talented. So since what I saw in when we were watching him in preseason, Marie Victorin, or when I go to training camp, during the week, I see, I see a very talented player, but it's flashes, Elias. It's flashes, and when you see flashes, it's almost worthy of a substitute, not a 90-minute player.
Exactly.
So that's it kind of sucks that he kind of worked himself into that kind of player profile, but that's just kind of where we're at, right? So where does CF Montreal go from here? Because these next 2 weeks are gonna be so crucial for CF Montreal. There's Inter Miami officially confirmed, right? We're gonna play them on next week. CF Montreal's playing them next week, followed by the second leg against Forge for the Canadian Championship. Sorry, Elias, you can label it whatever you want, but that's the game of the year, right? And I'm asking these questions specifically after a victory and the kind of game we saw against CFC last night. There will also probably be some key players coming back. Sinchuk, Duke, Waterman, hopefully Vrioni, Neil, Clark as well. Where does CF Montreal go from here with these very important weeks coming up?
Look, honestly, until you get, because even like you mentioned it, Sinchuk, Duke, Vrioni, Neil, I don't think so for a while. Again, Waterman will be back for the Forge game. Clark, all these players, if they're training again, that's one thing. Does not mean that they're ready to start games. Right? The starting lineup against Miami, look, let's be real here. Bryce Duke hasn't played in months, and Sinchuk hasn't played in months. Vrioni hasn't played in, like 2-3 weeks now because they had 2 weeks. They had a week and a half off. No, but they had a week off, and then he got hurt. Right? So it's been like 2 or 3 weeks now so that he hasn't played. Those guys are not just going to run back into the starting 11 necessarily, right? It's possible, but it's highly unlikely that someone like Kanai Sinchuk or Bryce Duke can just shake off months worth of rust and go like, I'm ready to start now. They may come off the bench against Miami, but I still think in large part, the lineup that you saw last night will be the lineup for the Miami game. So It'll be very. I mean, the last time Messi and company came to town, it was a very weird game. Messi did not play well. Suarez got a goal, but he did not play well. They had the best first half of the year, and then the worst second half of the year. It was one of those. So it'll be very interesting to see how if they can replicate a performance like they did against New York, against Miami, a team who was probably exhausted given how much they've played in the last couple
You think
weeks.
they give Messi a
And
rest?
I wouldn't be surprised. He just played a whole tournament.
Yeah.
He just played. I mean, a whole tournament is relative, right? But I wouldn't be surprised if Suarez and Messi both took a break.
Yeah. Me neither.
Again, you're headed to last place in the East. If you're Miami, maybe you see this as the chance to rotate some of your squad. Um, I mean, Robbie also with a pretty interesting comment. They should just concentrate on winning and getting better. The playoffs are out of reach. I mean, you're right. It's tough
Mental
to
health,
label as
baby.
another. It's tough to yeah. It's tough to label another transition season, but that's exactly what it is. That's what happens when you take 15 games to win your first one or something like that, right? Or take 13 games to win your first game. So, you are de facto, in a transition season, but that doesn't mean there's still nothing to play for. You still have the Canadian Championship that you're in. You still have a Canadian Classic to prepare for, and you still have, right, just general improvements that need to be made, right? Just because a lot of this squad will either be leaving at the midway point or at the end of the season, and we'll be bringing there'll be new players brought in, doesn't mean you have real concrete development to be made. So yeah, I mean, yeah, concentrate on winning. Obviously, you're a professional football club, but it's not like the season is completely over yet.
No. And I do agree with you, but they do need to take these next two games. My for me, for what CF Montreal needs to focus on these next few weeks and months is every game is a playoff. Okay,
Mhm.
like Robbie said, the playoffs are out of reach, but the playoffs can actually get very close after a few wins. It won't feel so out of reach because believe it or not, we're so focused on CF Montreal that they lose and all that, and we the fans get frustrated, the media gets frustrated, but at the end of the day, you're looking at other teams like Atlanta, DC United, that are just struggling so much that it actually makes CF Montreal's progress look decent. So,
Andy,
what?
they've got 3 wins. Relax.
I still believe. Believe.
That's what happens with Montreal, man. They win 2 games out of 3, and all of a sudden, ça sent la coupe.
Ça
Ça
sent la
sent la coupe.
coupe.
No, man. Look. In all honesty, like,
Yeah.
they've got to win like 4 games in a row if you want to put that out there. They've only won 3 all season, so until they start putting actual winning streaks together, not an unbeaten streak where you like win 3 games and draw 6. No, an actual winning streak, significant winning streak. I don't want to hear the word playoffs in this town. Nothing. Unless it's talking about the Alouettes. Unless it's talking about the Alouettes. There's no playoff talk in this town until hockey season.
Speaking of progress, we're going to move on to our last topic of the show. CF Montreal announced on Thursday, the least kept secret of all time, that midfielder Nathan Saliba has been transferred to Belgian First Division club RSC Anderlecht, where our former sporting director Olivier Renard is now in charge. Wonder why Nathan Saliba went there. The club will keep a percentage on Saliba's next transfer. Can you kind of summarize your thoughts on Nathan Saliba in Montreal? 3 seasons, 3 different coaches. He still garnered the attention of Europe. And yes, you can link it to Olivier Renard 100%. And I agree with that. But there were other teams that were interested around the Europe. So how would you summarize Nathan Saliba's time with CF Montreal?
In 2 words, it's missed opportunity, right? Because I genuinely believe that he is an Ismail Kone level prospect, right? And he's shown it with the national team. He's shown it when he's at his best with Montreal. He was playing last year, at least. He was playing very close to Mathieu Choignard's level, and he was like 5 years young, and he's 5 years younger, right? I think he has the ability and the potential to reach that level where he's not one of those players that gets to Europe and kind of fizzles out and then does whatever, where he has actual staying power. And even if he moves, he's in Europe. Um, I am disappointed. Like, I don't understand because it's fairly common practice to not sell players before they go off to international tournaments, especially someone like Nathan Sadeba, whose value can really only go up. If he doesn't play a single minute, his value is not going to change. Even if he doesn't play the best, his value is not going to change. But if he goes out there and he starts 2 games, he scores 2 goals, he plays excellent. And also, by the way, when he came on tonight against Guatemala, he was excellent. He was driving the ball, he was winning the ball back, he scored a penalty. But again, that's just a small penalty. But his value can only go up now. So you have this player that just is in great form, that just had a great international tournament, that you have, European clubs coming in and that are interested in him, and you kind of sell him a bit early, I feel. You could have held on to him until even after, right? Even just you sell him in July. If you really, if clubs in Europe were committed to get him in their off season, not in MLS's, you wait until after the Gold Cup. So I'm very curious to see what Gabriel Gervais and the board's approach to this transfer was, because again, like you said, it was the worst kept secret, right? There was interest in from Europe during the off season. There was always going to be interest in Europe during the season. So again, nobody's surprised that he's moving, but the fact that this is how it went down, I feel like they could have gone a much heftier price tag than 2.2 million. So I'm a little disappointed in that. But again, there's no one on the team right now that deserves it more than him. So I wish him all the best. I'd love to see him thrive.
Yeah, and I think Nathan Saliba, despite the difficult circumstances that he faced, not
Mhm.
just him, but everybody around him faced, I can't imagine what the first 3 years in a professional club, you lose your head, you're the coach that first coached you, your first year, then you lose your second coach mid after 5 games, and then, in my opinion, Nathan Saliba had his best game with CF Montreal right before he left on the international window. That's my opinion. Don't really get to see him necessarily at his best. I think he kind of left us with that taste in our mouth where we say, what else could he have done if we just gave him that chance here? As far as maybe him signing a new contract, or maybe just like you said, with maybe a bigger release cost, whatever it may be, it just feels like it was rushed. And yes, they're in the CF Montreal is looking at it in the bigger picture where they can kind of sell off the idea where they say, look, guys, Ismael Kone, Nathan Saliba, all these young players are going to Europe. Their sales pitch continues, regardless of how
Mhm.
terrible of a season they're having. It still manages, because you do have to convince the academy kids, and you have to convince the parents to keep their kids in the academy,
Yeah.
to wait for their chance to be able to move that to that Europe and not ditch them for a university or another academy, another team, right? So it's very, very tricky situation, because I think they've kind of besides Mathieu Chonea, when was the last time they transferred a kid so young from the academy?
Kone.
Tabla. Okay, yeah, 2022. It's already been 3 years. It's been 3 years.
Holy shit! Yeah,
Yeah,
time flies, man.
yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be. We're gonna see how he
Yeah, before that,
performs.
you're right. It's Balu Tabla.
We are gonna keep an eye on him while he's in Belgium, because obviously,
Mhm.
as people that have seen him grow here at CF Montreal, we do want to see him progress also in Europe and see him have the success that we think he can have. But yeah, so that concludes our show. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope you enjoyed tonight's show. As always, the podcast will always be free to listen and watch on all of our platforms. Make sure to check out our Patreon page for exclusive member content and all of our social media platforms for more content, and follow my account as well as Elias' account on X, Instagram, everywhere. Big shout out to all of you who joined the Patreon this week, and thank you again to all of you who tuned in tonight, and see you next week for episode 231 of The Ball is Round.